Good evening. I'm Rhonda Allen, President of the Tri-County, Alabama chapter of the Links Incorporated. The Links Incorporated was founded over 74 years ago with a devotion to providing impactful programs that benefit our community. The Tri-County chapter was chartered 10 years ago, and we are very proud to continue the legacy of this great organization with tonight's program. On behalf of the 47 members, welcome, and thank you for joining our annual legislative update. This evening, we will have a conversation with state and U.S. representatives on important governmental issues that impact each of us. But first, let me welcome Mrs. Katrina Jackson, Chairman of our National Trends and Services Facet, who will introduce our moderator for the evening. Mrs. Jackson.
You're on mute.
Mrs. Jackson.
Good evening to the distinguished panel, guests, friends, and Links chapter members. My name is Katrina Jackson, and I am the chair of the National Trends and Services Facet of the Tri-County, Alabama chapter of the Links Incorporated. The National Trends and Services Facet is tasked with eliminating disparities by reducing barriers to resources through advocacy, education, and service. Our chapters are empowered to raise their voices and transform the communities in which they serve. With that being said, we are hosting tonight's legislative updates with the charismatic Representative Wandalyn Gavan serving as the moderator. Representative Wandalyn Gavan was elected to a third term in the Alabama House of Representatives, House District 60. Representative Gavan is the owner and practicing attorney at Gavan and Associates. She strives daily to represent the people of House District 60 with voice, vision, and leadership. She is also a proud member of the Tri-County, Alabama chapter of the Links Incorporated. So, without further ado, I present Representative Wandalyn Gavan.
Thank you. It is my honor and pleasure to be here tonight for this annual legislative update for the Tri-County chapter of the Links Incorporated. We are so delighted and so honored to have as our special honored guest none other than our own Congresswoman from the 7th Congressional District, Congresswoman Terry A. Sewell. And of course, we always have to make sure that we have a handsome man in the House who is also intelligent and bright and a leader here in the state of Alabama as well. And tonight we are honored to have the chairman of the Alabama Democratic Party here in the state of Alabama, Representative Christopher England of Tuscaloosa, the 7th district here in the state of Alabama. Tonight, we're going to discuss many of the issues that impact us globally as well as here in the United States of America. As we all know, we are in the middle of one of the most catastrophic pandemics that we have ever faced in the country, and especially here in modern days, in modern times, from starting last year up to this point. We know that we have lost over 500,000 people here in the United States alone, and we are still counting. So tonight we want to hear from our leaders. We want them to enlighten us as to the issues of the day that we have concerns about, especially with regards to the stimulus monies that we are hoping will come down by way of the added monies to the CARES Act. We are also dealing with vaccination issues across the country. And then, of course, we have issues relative to social injustice and civil rights violations of all types, police brutality, and all of those issues that we've been hearing about and have so greatly touched our lives in just a year. So at this point, I will not belabor this introduction. We'll move right into our speakers. Tonight, as I mentioned a moment ago, we have Representative Christopher England, and he is going to brief us at this moment with regards to what we can do with regards to voter participation, issues that are impacting our state, as well as just enlighten us about the Democratic Party and what that entails and what we can do to help strengthen our Democratic Party here in the state of Alabama. Representative England.
Thank you, Representative Gavan, and it's an honor to be here. Thank you with Congresswoman Sewell and with Links Incorporated. I'm honored just to be here, and it's not often that people tell you that they want to listen to you talk a little bit. So I really appreciate it, and also I would like to say Representative Gavan is one of my leaders. She's one of the House leaders. She is a fearless leader. And if there's anybody in the House of Representatives that will hold you accountable, it is Representative Wandalyn Gavan. So she don't take no mess. But I'm not going to belabor the point. I'm not going to beat around the bush. Alabama is controlled by Republicans from top to bottom. We have both senators are Republicans. Our congressional House delegation is made up of 7 members, 6 of which are Republicans. At this point, all white males. And in the House of Representatives, there are 35 Democrats. There are 27 in the House, 8 in the Senate, out of 105 members. So every statewide office is a Republican. So that is the environment under which we are required to work. So oftentimes we, as legislators, have aspirational goals and we have definite realities. Aspirationally, we have things where we want to make sure that the ballot box is accessible to everyone without any unnecessary and undue delay and barriers. We also want to make sure that everybody has access to quality health care, including expanding Medicaid. We also want to make sure that during this pandemic, that as we emerge from it, that everyone has an equal opportunity to get vaccinated. We also want to make sure that all of our citizens are treated fairly and their human rights and civil rights are respected. Those are aspirational. The reality is many of our Republican colleagues don't share some of the same goals. That's why in Alabama, we have not expanded Medicaid, which means that over the last 10 years, 17 of our hospitals in rural areas have closed. Also, as far as respecting human and civil rights, you've seen in our current legislative session, bills that have targeted various communities. For example, families that are going through issues with their children who are seeking care. Our Republican colleagues across the aisle have filed legislation to limit their options in terms of not necessarily good public policy, but more so because they don't like the people. Also, what you've seen is movements towards restricting voting rights and access to the ballot box. After record numbers turned out, the people who claim to love democracy are now trying to limit access to it. Our president at one point said that the more people to vote, the less likely we are to win. So that means that you're seeing, based off of lies, innuendo, and outright misinformation, movements to suggest that the quality and the integrity of our elections are under attack because more people can vote. So Alabama is no different than the rest of the country in that regard, and we are seeing legislation here that is attempting to restrict our right to vote. And also, I don't think it's lost on anyone that across the country, the previous administration had failed in its response to the coronavirus and the pandemic. So we've lost hundreds of thousands of lives needlessly. And as we again begin to emerge from the coronavirus, what we have seen in communities of color across the state, even in the same city, access to vaccinations has been based on your community and your zip code and your socioeconomic status, and unfortunately, your race. So as we struggle to make sure that our communities are taken care of, just like our white counterparts, it is incumbent upon all of us to continue that struggle. And that struggle does not just stop with you going to Twitter and tweeting out a nice statement, or Facebook and posting a nice statement about something, or filming a video where you're angry and you're making a statement. You've got to turn those feelings into action. And that means getting out of your house, going to the ballot box and voting. That also means advocating passionately for issues that matter to you. That also means running for office. We have to engage the political process at all levels in order for our people to be adequately represented. To that end, the Alabama Democratic Party is doing whatever it can do to connect our people to the political process. Whether that means we're fundraising to make sure that we have adequate resources to mount competitive campaigns, whether that means we are training individuals who express interest in becoming candidates for public office, or we are canvassing and assisting candidates and making sure that they can reach their voters and we turn out the vote. Many people have contacted me and asked me, what are you guys doing to make us competitive in 2022? Well, first, trying to convince wonderful candidates like Congresswoman Sewell and Wanda Gavan to continue to run for office and maybe even U.S. Senate. I did hear that comment. But the bottom line is we have to create the foundation where our voters can grow. We discovered our numbers that almost 400,000 people in Alabama who were registered voters who vote Democrat did not vote. That means that we go from 60-40 to 50-50 if people just participate in the process. The bottom line here is the numbers that we are looking for to make a difference in the upcoming election cycle are already here. They are staring us in the face. So it is our job as voters and people who are engaged to make the connection between your activism and the political process. Take your protest to the polls. If your community is struggling to find access to care and to vaccinations or quality education or quality health care, take your protest to the polls. You can no longer sit at the house and be upset. Everybody has to know we're mad now. The difference will be in 2022, instead of just being on the ballot, we are competitive.
Yep.
So that's what we need from you as people who are informed and engaged. It is now time to take your energy, your protest to the ballot box. So with that, I will yield the rest of my time to our moderator, Representative Gavan. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative England. I was about to say, preach, brother, because the citizens really don't know what we go through with at daily. Being elected officials for us, this is a 24-hour-a-day, 7 days a week, very thankless job. And we hear issues that range from, as you mentioned, healthcare, the pandemic, from trash on the street. Just every single day, things that go on in Washington, trying to make sure that we reach out to our Congresswoman when we have issues with constituent issues. And again, there are so many issues, but I think you touched upon it. Making sure that we have a representative, massive turnout at the polls to ensure that we keep hardworking people in office, and that we also not only keep us in office or the hardworking individuals that are already elected officials, but also to bring in new elected officials. But most importantly, also to turn the tide, that we can begin to look at increasing the number of Democrats who hold these positions. And that is why this is so important that we continue, and why we continue every day to emphasize the importance of the vote. And I also wanted to make sure that everybody here knew Representative England is in his 4th term in office. He is an attorney here in the state of Alabama. He is also the son of Judge England, retired Judge Emeritus. John England in Tuscaloosa County, and he does a phenomenal job here with the Alabama Democratic Party. And I think he is now the youngest chairman of that party. And we're going to come back to you in just a moment because we have a few questions just talking about the voting process and what that will entail for 2020. I'm glad you made that plug into Congresswoman Sewell, Senator Sewell, hopefully. Hint, hint. But at this time, we are delighted to introduce to you the woman of the hour, our fearless leader in Washington, D.C. She has been fighting for over the course of, I think, about 6 terms now, Congresswoman Sewell, to represent us in Washington. She is no shrinking violet. She is a phenomenal, fierce, fabulous, intelligent, bright leader in Washington, D.C., and she serves on the most powerful committee in Washington, and everybody knows that is the Ways and Means Committee, and she is no joke. And so at this time, I am honored to introduce you, Nancy Sewell's daughter, a proud native of Selma, Alabama, a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, a graduate from Princeton University, Oxford University, an attorney at law. She has worked for Maynard Cooper & Gale. She knows numbers. She is, and again, just a great leader here in the state of Alabama. Congresswoman Sewell, welcome, welcome, welcome again on behalf of our president, Rhonda Allen, and all of the members of the Tri-County chapter of the Links Incorporated, and also our National Trends and Services Chairman, Link Katrina Jackson. Well,
thank you so much. You can introduce me wherever I go. Only a soror knows how to do that. Let me start by just thanking the Tri-County Links Incorporated chapter. I want to also thank your president and all the members of the Tri-County Links for this invitation. And I am just so pleased to be on the same program with my president of the Alabama Democratic Party, none other than Representative Chris England, as well as Representative Wandalyn Gavan, both of whom proudly represent constituents in Alabama's 7th congressional district. And I want to thank you both for the partnership that we've enjoyed over the years on behalf of our constituents. I just want to say thank you because we cannot do this alone. We don't walk this journey alone. We have to leverage every lever of government on behalf of the people that we represent. And so I am just thrilled to be a part of this conversation. I will just get right down to it. As Representative England said, and Representative Gavan a second, it is critically important that you know what's going on around you. An informed electorate is a powerful electorate. We want to make sure that our constituents are informed, but they are also involved and engaged in the political process. It is said that those who are not at the table are on the menu, and we can ill afford to have our constituents on anyone's menu. So with that, I want to acknowledge what we're doing right here in Washington, D.C. As many of you know, at 2 o'clock in the morning, 4-day Saturday, the House of Representatives passed on a partisan vote, but passed, no doubt, the Biden American Rescue Plan, $1.9 trillion that will help stimulate this economy, help get our students back into classrooms safely, provide more resources for American families, and yes, vaccinations for everyone. With that, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the plan and give you some of the stats about the bill on a high level. First, we all know that this pandemic has affected our lives and our livelihoods. In the state of Alabama alone, we have lost 9,560 individuals. These are our loved ones, our neighbors, our constituents, our church members. These are Americans. These are Alabamians. And this was in many instances, a senseless death when we think about the fact that we had a president and an administration that denied its very existence for months, that did not institute a national strategy. But I want you to know that with the Biden-Harris administration, help is on the way. It's on the way in the form of this American Rescue Package. The time for decisive action is now. As I stated, we passed it out of the House. We presented it to the Senate. The Senate must act, and indeed the president will sign this bill into law, and it must occur before the March 14th deadline when unemployment benefits will expire. The president's plan will save lives and livelihoods. It will put vaccines in the arms of Americans. The plan will mount a national vaccination program that will include setting up community vaccination sites nationwide. It will also take complementary measures to combat the virus, including scaling up testing, contact tracing, and addressing the shortage of personal protective equipment and other critical supplies, and invest in addressing healthcare disparities. Ladies, this is critically important, as you know, since this disease has disproportionately affected communities of color. We are dying at rates higher than we are in the population. The state of Alabama is 27% African American, yet we are getting Covet at rates of 38%, and we're dying at rates of 33%. Simply unacceptable. And we must get vaccinations in the arms of the people who need it most. But we must also address in a critical way, which is why so many millions of dollars of this rescue plan will go to targeted investment in our communities to get the word out, the truth about the vaccination. We have vaccination hesitancy in our community, and we do legitimately because we know about the Tuskegee experiment. We know that our community is more hesitant to take the vaccine. So that's why we need targeted, directed, and intentional funding from trusted leaders in our community to talk about the vaccine. What I love most about the Biden administration is that they have put together a czar, if you will, on equity, because they realize, as do we, that we need an equitable distribution when it comes to the vaccine, when it comes to testing, when it comes to PPE, when it comes to everything, affects equity. And it affects different communities differently. And no community needs to be left out, and definitely not the communities that we represent. The American Rescue Plan would also put children safely back in schools. The plan will make a nearly $130 billion investment in school reopening and making up for lost learning, because we know we've had lost learning. We know that we have, and I've been fighting from the moment I got into Congress, because living in the Black Belt, we have inequity when it comes to broadband. And now more than ever, we need an equitable distribution of this critical infrastructure. If we can put telephones in every hamlet, village, township, county, we can definitely put broadband in, not just for distance learning, not just for teleworking, but also for telehealth, in order to be able to deliver services to needed communities and underserved areas. The American Rescue Plan will put money in the pockets of people. The plan will finish the job of President Biden's promise to provide $2,000 in direct assistance to households across America. That includes $1,400 per person, following on to the $600 down payment that we enacted back in December. The plan would also provide direct housing assistance, nutrition assistance for 40 million Americans, expand access to safe and reliable child care, and affordable health care. It will put people back to work. The plan will provide critical funding for hardest hit small businesses and extend it for minority and women-owned businesses by making sure that they can access this federal funds, because we know it is unequally accessed at present. The plan will also provide critical resources for workers and teachers in transit. And when we think of our frontline workers, our essential workers, they're the ones who often cannot take time out. They need not only more resources, but they need more money, and they need more opportunity. This bill is critically important also because it provides direct assistance to our cities and our counties. You know, Alabama, the state of Alabama got $1.7 billion with a B dollars from the CARES Act. But in order for cities like Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, Montgomery, or counties like Montgomery County, Tuscaloosa County, Pickens County, they had to be reimbursed for money spent on the front end. Now, you and I both know that so many of these counties and so many of these cities didn't have the resources in their hands to purchase this on the front end. They needed rescue money in their hands like the state got, but the state instituted a reimbursement strategy. Well, I hear you. I see you. I know how important this is that we get money directly to our localities. And this bill will do just that. $475 million in direct funding will come to the cities and counties of the state of Alabama, and Alabama's 7th congressional district will get $475 million. What that will mean, the estimate is that the city of Birmingham will receive $149 million directly, the city of Tuscaloosa, $21 million, the city of Montgomery, $42 million, Dallas County, Alabama, where Selma is, $7 million, and Jefferson County, $129 million. These are simply estimates, but the reality is to know that this money will now bypass the state and go to localities and go to counties. The very smallest of counties and the very smallest of cities will have to get their money directly from the state, but the bigger cities will not. And so we thought about this, and it's all about logistically getting the money to them. So big cities, we have all the stats and all the things that we need in order to get that money to them. But the money that we are enumerating will get to all of the cities and the counties. Something that I'm particularly proud of that we put in this bill was not only this local funding, local and a city and county, but we also provide new incentives for Medicaid expansion. Yes, the bill will provide a new incentive for the 14 states like Alabama that did not expand Medicaid to do so by temporarily increasing the base federal medical assistance percentage, they call it the FMAP, by 5 percentage points for 2 years for any state that expands. And if all 12 or 14 states that expand Medicaid, then that means over 2 million more people will actually get relief. It also expands subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. And it also included, as you not noticed, that the Biden administration came in and gave us an extra 5 months for people to sign up. This is in the middle of a global pandemic. The enrollment period normally is October and it ends in December. Well, they've now opened it up for this emergency period until and through the end of April. So this is just some of the things. And I just want to end by saying that we also this week will actually pass out of the House of Representatives the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. As so many of you know, in response to the death of the innocent and senseless death and disparity that exists in America between Blacks and whites, the fact is that African Americans are twice as likely, and we're only 13% of the overall population in America, but we're twice as likely to die at the hands of the police and 3 times to die at the hands of police when we are unarmed. I'm going to repeat that. That national stat in and of itself cries out for justice, and it cries out for relief to our people. And so the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act will come up this week, and that bill will include the following 3 things. We can talk about them more generally if you have questions about this, but specifically it will work to end racial and religious profiling by prohibiting states and federal government and law enforcement from profiling. It will provide mandated racial law enforcement training. It will save lives by banning chokeholds and no-knock warrants that killed Breonna Taylor. It will also provide limited military equipment on American streets, and it will require body cams. It will hold police accountable in the courts by finally making it easier to prosecute offending of officers by amending the federal criminal statute to prosecute police officer. It will no longer be a willful standard, but a reckless standard for those lawyers out there. And it will enable individuals to recover damages in civil court when a law enforcement officer violates their civil rights by eliminating qualified immunity for law enforcement. It will investigate police misconduct. It will empower communities to reimagine their public safety in an equitable and just way. And it will change the culture of law enforcement with training to build integrity and trust. There are so many things that are in this bill, as well as the American plan, the rescue plan, the Biden American Rescue Plan. But I just want you all to know that the Biden-Harris administration is here to work and to roll up their sleeves on America's behalf. And I'm here to be that change agent with Representative Gavan and Representative England on behalf of the people that we are so blessed to represent. You know, HR 4 is my seminal piece of legislation, and that the hearings for HR 4, the Voting Rights Advancement Act, which we have now renamed the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, that will fully restore the protections under the VRA that was gutted by the Shelby versus Holder decision in 2013. A new formula. You know, the Supreme Court told us we need congressional action, and I have been filing this bill since 2013. I look forward to the set of hearings that will set up the evidentiary record on why state actors still need pre-clearance. We've got to put the full effect of the Voting Rights Act, the teeth back into the Voting Rights Act in order to ensure that egregious state actors have to pre-clear any changes in federal law, in their voting laws, state voting laws, pre-cleared if they are an egregious actor. I look forward to Alabama being one of those states, I hope and pray, and we will make sure that we have pre-clearance restored. We cannot let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So whatever the formula is, we should learn to live with it, because we know that state actors like Alabama can be good for only so long. We need pre-clearance back into that. And so currently the current formula was struck down, as all of you know, under Shelby versus Holder. And I look forward to working diligently with all of you on behalf of the people that we represent. I know that yesterday was the last day of Black History Month, and we all know that we have to celebrate and the significant contributions of African Americans, not just 1 month, but 365 days out of the year. It was Martin Luther King who said the time is always ripe to do what is right. And I finally think, with control of the House of Representatives, control of the Senate, because we went to the polls and we voted. Your vote does matter. Your vote does matter. Look at Georgia. Look at the fact that we now hold the Senate, the House, and the White House. We will pass HR 4, the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights, and I look forward to be its lead sponsor in the House of Representatives. Thank you for this opportunity, and I want all of you to remember that old battles do become new again, that progress is a constant struggle, and that every generation must take up the mantle. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you for that. Wonderful, wonderful update, legislative update. We do have some questions, Congresswoman Sewell and Representative England. We'll begin with Congresswoman Sewell. What is being done to ensure that veterans who are not eligible to get the COVID vaccination at the VA due to the financial guidelines which prohibit their enrollment at the VA?
So we are working on making sure that those who have served our country, who have earned these benefits, have earned these rights, should get them and have access to them. So I would, if there's any veterans that have been denied, they should call my Birmingham office. That office number is 205-254-1960. 254-1960. We obviously, in order to be able to help our veterans or able to do any kind of casework, we'll need a privacy waiver. So just know that we are working to make sure that our veterans are eligible. As everyone knows, the strategy and the categories are on our Alabama Public Health Department's website. The advantage that veterans have is that they have a unique place that they can go and get their shots. But it is true that there are certain guidelines that have been that restricted certain veterans to apply. It's simply unacceptable. And on a case-by-case basis, we've been able to work through that problem. So please reach out to my staff.
All right, next question. What does the Covet American Rescue Plan do to expand the child tax credit?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that, because that was part of my bill. You know, as many of you know, I was a tax lawyer, a bond lawyer before I was a member of Congress. I am just thrilled that the American Rescue Plan will make child tax credit, extends the child tax credit, and lifts millions of children out of poverty. The extension of the child tax credit will increase the amount that each child can get. And also because it's fully refundable, so often people who make really low income can't even apply for the child tax credit. And we're trying to eliminate that ability right now. And so the specifics of that particular of the child tax credit, I got so many pieces of paper here, but the specifics of that are as follows. The child tax credit and the earned income tax credit will both become fully refundable and will be extended so that even the childless folks who can't usually apply for earned income tax credit, they are now waived for 2 years and will be able to secure the child to use the earned income tax credit. And likewise, there are millions of children that are currently in poverty that will get out of poverty simply because now they will have an opportunity to take full advantage of the child tax credit. Likewise, we will also increase the amount of money that every state receives for dependent child entitlement. And so our state is due to get $27 million more money than it would normally get just for the child care dependents, that formula. And so those are the things about the child tax credit that I don't want to go into the weeds, but you can look at my website, sewell.house.gov. On Saturday morning, 4-day, we put that up on our website, our most recent press release about the American Rescue Plan, and it delineates all of the good stuff that's in there. So I direct you to sewell.house.gov for more specifics.
Congresswoman Sewell, what is the likelihood that the George Floyd Act will pass both houses of Congress?
So the likelihood that it will pass the House of Representatives, it will pass the House of Representatives on Thursday. You can take that to the bank. It will go over to the Senate. And the problems that the senators, moderate Democrats, and we have to win, because this is not by budget reconciliation like the rescue plan, which only needs 51 votes out of the Senate to pass. So the reason why we did the budget reconciliation process for Biden's rescue plan is because this is a promise that Biden made and he wants to keep. He wants to do the same thing on the police accountability, the justice and police bill as well. But the problem is that we don't have any tools in the toolkit to get around the 60 votes needed in the Senate, on the Senate side, in order to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. We'll need that same 60 votes to pass HR 4. So while we have 50-50 with our vice president deciding a tie vote, so we have a 51 majority over on the Senate side, in order to pass any bills that don't directly affect budget reconciliation. So any kind of authorizing bill like the George Floyd Act or the VRA Restoration Act, my John Lewis bill, those will require 60 votes. And the hang-up that most Republicans have is unqualified immunity. They don't want us to get rid of the ability to sue wrongful police officers for civil,
Liability.
For liability, for money, for people to get money if they kill if they unnecessarily and senselessly kill citizens. So there it is because Biden wants to pass a Police Accountability Act, and because Democrats have promised that, there will be some deals that will be cut on the Senate side. And I think the first thing that may be in jeopardy is qualified immunity. But there are lots of things that we all agree on. That's getting rid of chokeholds, no-knock warrants, providing more resources for social services like domestic abuse, mental health, all of those reimagining, those grant opportunities for communities to reimagine their police force and how the community and the police work together. Those are things that everybody agrees with. So it may not be in its current form that it passes out of the House on Thursday, but I do believe the commitment is there to do something on justice and policing.
Okay, I'm going to get into our Representative England in just a second, but several more questions are coming in for Congresswoman Sewell. Education. Will we get our children back into the classrooms, and what is the funding amount that will ensure the safety of our children being back in the classrooms and making our classrooms safe again?
So it's 130, the rescue plan has $130 billion just to safely reopen K through 12 and higher ed. The K through 12 is by far the bulk of it. And while I don't know if that will actually happen by the end of the first 100 days, I know that Biden wants it to. The reality is that so many of our classrooms must be retrofitted in order to have the social distancing, in order for us to have the proper PPE and the like, and that takes time. So if we pass the budget, we've already passed it out of the House, it has to pass out of the Senate before March 14th. It has to then be signed into law. So we're running against the clock right now. So say it doesn't actually get signed into law until March 13th, well, because we tend to hit the deadline when we need to meet the deadline. The reality is the money won't get to places until the end of March. So now we're looking at April. But do I believe that the resources and the strategic leadership is there in the Biden-Harris administration to safely get our schools back open? Absolutely. And now they'll have the resources to do so.
Congresswoman, so do you know how the funds will be, I guess, released or distributed with regards to the education here?
Yeah, so some of them will be through Title I, which means it'll go to the neediest of children. I'm not sure of exactly the amount for that. Some will go to the state, unfortunately. Some, but those of us who understand the importance of poor children, the children who are the most needy, is getting it. We've tried to funnel as much as we can through Title I to get to those children, to go directly to those school systems based on the Title I formula. And so, I don't know the specific amounts, but I do know the overall package for K through 12 is $130 billion.
Is there anything planned for higher education?
Absolutely, absolutely. And we also want to make sure that that includes private colleges like Miles and Tuskegee and others, trying to make sure that we have an equitable distribution of those resources and those funds.
All right. We have, I'm going to come right back to you, Congresswoman Sewell, in 1 second. Representative England, get out the vote effort on behalf of the Democratic Party. You mentioned that we have some major concerns that there are major issues that we definitely should be concerned with regards to voting, especially within the 22 election and the attempt by our colleagues on the opposite side of the aisle to disenfranchise African-American Black voters. What are we doing? Because we're seeing that we're going to run into the same problem that the state of Georgia is actually experiencing now. What will the Democratic Party do to ensure that we are not disenfranchised, but also what will be the strategy 2020?
It's a great question. And one of the things that we really need to understand about being a Democrat is that it's complicated. We deal in nuance, and we also have to discuss with our voters, not only do they have to vote, but why. It would be great if we were like Republicans and we could just come up with great little slogans that we can say and just throw at you in 10 seconds. And then, you would be voting off identity politics and not really concerned about your own issues. And I can't answer that question without acknowledging that there is a significant disconnect between the Democratic Party and the base of the party. We have to do more work to intentionally engage the base. And that is African Americans who have sacrificed and have been loyal to the party since for the last several decades. So to that end, in order to get those 400,000 people to the polls, the Democratic Party will be very deliberate and intentional about changing our transactional nature of our relationships to actual real relationships. So that means that we're not just coming to you a few months before an election cycle, passing you a ballot and say, vote for the people on this list. What we are doing will be introducing you to our candidates, introducing you to our issues. So when you go to the ballot box or when you go to the vote, you are not just voting because you were told to, you are voting because you believe in what we are talking about, and we agree. So the Democratic Party for the next 2 years is not only going to be working to recruit candidates and train them, but to also recreate that relationship that has been lost over years of neglect in Black people, and just putting it bluntly, being taken for granted. That's the base of our party. And we also know that there is a phenomenon that at the same time it's sort of illuminating, it is also depressing. In the last election cycle, we witnessed there were people who showed up in 2016 and 2020 just to vote for Donald Trump, did not vote in municipal elections, did not vote in midterm elections. All they did was vote in 2016 for Donald Trump, and then they returned in 2020 and voted for Donald Trump, and that was it. So what we have found is that there's a certain level of demagoguery that can convince a large number of Alabamians to go to the polls, which means that you will see Republicans who enter into the Senate race and other races trying to attack that voting base and retrieve it. So that means that, again, as we build our candidacy and we build these relationships, we're also going to have to withstand some of that demagoguery as well. Listen, just to level with you, Alabama politics generally turns into a crazy contest. Generally turns in who can be the most outlandish, the most ridiculous, the person who can make an example of people, who can target the most people, so we can all determine who the victims are and make sure that they're exploited. And that's unfortunate, but that's where we are right now. So we have to arm our voters with information, make sure they understand that there's a meaningful relationship between the party and your issues, and we're not just here for your vote, we're here for your partnership. So when we go to 2020, when you come to the polls, you are voting because you agree with us and not because you think we're scared you into it or we're trying to turn you into a victim. This is a partnership, and we have to approach it as such. To that end, also, the Alabama Republicans understand the nature of politics is that the party in charge oftentimes gets fat off of their own success. The Democrats for hundreds of years controlled the state of Alabama, got lazy, and look what happened in 2010. So there are two ways you can approach it. You can either work hard to create voters, or you can work hard to make it hard for people to vote. Unfortunately, in Georgia, as we've seen, and in Alabama, people are working harder to keep us from voting. But that only means one thing. That means they understand the power that we have. They understand that once we realize what's going on and we recognize our power, if we use it, we can change the dynamic. So we need to fight and make sure that the Alabamians understand that you should not have to require an excuse to vote absentee. It's ridiculous. It's rooted in Jim Crow and racism. It's how they determined who voted and who didn't, and to make it harder for people of color to vote in the 60s. So we need to make sure we push our Republican colleagues to end requiring an excuse for absentee balloting. But we also need to encourage them to early voting, same-day registration, and many of the other advancements that we've seen around the country. It's no secret that either you can work to create voters or try to stop people from voting. And that's what's going on in Alabama.
Thank you, Representative England. Congresswoman Sewell, what does the COVID American Rescue Plan do to expand Medicaid?
So, as I said, we were able to put the provision in the rescue plan to incentivize states that have not expanded Medicaid. Now, there was a really amazing incentive the first 5 years of the Affordable Care Act that the state of Alabama chose party over people and did not expand Medicaid. The first 3 years was supposed to be 100%, meaning we were giving money away to the federal government, was giving states money away in order to actually have them expand Medicaid. So the first 3 years would have been for free, then 95% paid for by the federal government, then 90% paid by the federal government. I have a bill that would expand Medicaid, give the incentive, the same incentive, even now. Now, I couldn't get that full bill in this package because it was too expensive, and we were already at $1.9 trillion. But we did have a 2-year expansion for Medicaid expansion in order to through the FMAP. So we basically give Alabama money to expand Medicaid for 2 years, and we expand something called the FMAP, which is hard to understand, but it's all about Medicaid. And Alabama currently has the most bare bone Medicaid benefits of any state. And so by topping it up, by giving them more money, we're trying to incentivize Alabama to go ahead and expand Medicaid, even through this particular bill. And the details of that are on the more expansive press release that I've already steered you to on our website. But I wanted to go back to something that President, Chairman England, chairman of the Alabama Democratic Party, said, and that is that we have to work together to make sure people go to the polls. People see Alabama as not winnable on a statewide basis, and it can be winnable if we expand, if the people who can vote go to the polls and vote. And that's what Chris was saying earlier. And I just want to, I know that Alabama is not Georgia and Birmingham is not Atlanta, but let's not go to sleep on the power that we have within us if we only get the people out who can vote in the state of Alabama. And so, I have a job. I love the job that I currently have. I think it's critically important that we get HR 4 across the finish line, and we finally have an opportunity to do that. I have to keep my eyes on the prize, and that prize is to help the people of the 7th Congressional District and Alabama generally in Congress. But having said that, it is no doubt in my mind that the Senate needs an African-American woman's voice at the table. And with Kamala Harris now gone, there are now 3 men in Congress, African-American men, and 0 women. And I think that that's unacceptable. And so, I just wanted to say that I think that that we have been the strength of the Democratic Party, the African-American woman. We are the ones who are organizing, we're the ones that are mobilizing, and we're the ones who, when we do get a seat at the table, have, make our voices heard. And so for me to not even think about it was not an option, because I should. I've earned that right after 10 years of being in this position and fighting hard every day on behalf of all of Alabamians, but especially the disenfranchised, the voiceless, the powerless. And so, I don't know if, if we who are elected officials don't think about higher office, then who will do that? I can't encourage my niece and all of the wonderful young women that I mentor to do something that I'm not willing to consider. And so we will do our homework, because that's what we do. We do our homework. But I just also want you all to know that I don't take lightly the fact that I have the only Democratic seat in the House. And it's critically important to me that we capitalize and leverage now having every lever of government to get Black elected officials, Black judges, to get more resources in our neighborhoods, more targeted resources in our neighborhoods. I've been fighting for greater resources for broadband, for wastewater. And these are things that I can now, with a partner in the White House and with the Senate, can really work to try to do. So I think that that's really important. And I wanted to address the elephant in the room about that, because, you know, I think that we as Black women are often, we as women can sometimes rule ourselves out without necessarily giving it any thought. You know, it's often said that men look in the mirror and they see governor, they see, you know, president, they see chairman of the Alabama Democratic Party. And we as women look in the mirror and we see the zit, we see that I need some more lipstick. I need to, you know, we see our flaws and not our possibilities sometimes. And if there's anything that Kamala Harris ascending into the vice presidency has taught every girl, every little girl, especially little girls of color, and that is that they can, if they can see it, they can achieve it and they can be it. And so we cannot rule ourselves out as from positions of power.
And we certainly thank you, woman. So we know you have to go, and we're about to wrap up. We want to certainly encourage people to vote, but we want to encourage people to encourage other people. You know, I was at a rally the other day, and one of the statements that was made, that old rallying cry, fired up, ready to go. But I said, fired up, stay ready to vote. We've got to stay ready to vote. But we have one more very important question we must ask you about: the vaccines. You mentioned that there will be additional vaccines coming. The question for Alabamians, the big question: when?
So the reality is that Alabama had a slow start. You know, the very first time we got vaccinations, and even now, if you check the number of vaccines that we've gotten and the numbers of vaccines in arms, we only have a 60% rate. So when I go to ask for more vaccinations, more doses, they say, what? Alabama is not being efficient with the ones that they have. Why are they not equitably distributed? Why is it that not one vaccine location is in North Birmingham? Unacceptable. So what's good about having the Biden-Harris White House is that, you know, I got the White House equitable folks and all of the vaccination people together with Mayor Woodfin and Councilor Parker and Commissioner Tyson to address that with the federally qualified healthcare center, ARMS, which is located in North Birmingham, to try to get a federal site. So if the state, we have to get the state to do its job, which is to utilize the doses it does have in a more equitable way, utilizing sites like the Mass site that was in Selma, which finally got a lot of folks who otherwise couldn't get appointments because it was first come, first serve. And they were the 5,000 doses were gone in 3 days, not 5. It was supposed to be 1,000 a day. And so when I asked Dr. Harris, and I know that these are public health professionals, they're not logistics experts. And so it may be easier to give it to a hospital, but better if you had a site located in an African-American community at that local church, or utilizing our community health clinics, or more importantly, utilizing the money that I fought for at the very end to put in this end of the year package in December when the $600 checks were distributed. We have money for mobile units. Why has Alabama not rolled out mobile units? There's money sitting there for that particular purpose. And so, you know, I think that getting better resources to help Alabama. So I've asked the CDC and FEMA to work with the Alabama Public Health Department to increase the number of sites and places, because not everybody can go to a CVS or a Walgreens. They need to be able to use independent pharmacies that are located in our communities, just like they do these bigger pharmacies. And so those are things those are very important points to make and to be at the table to articulate. And then when it doesn't come to fruition, being able to mobilize the White House to help us solve that problem. So I fully expect, and stay tuned, we can't have FEMA help us do a mass site everywhere, but we can definitely try to close the gaps where they exist currently and continue to get more vaccinations, which we will, because now the J&J, Johnson & Johnson, over the weekend got its emergency certification. So now we'll have 3 vaccines in the arsenal, one of which, J&J, doesn't require all that hyper refrigeration that the Pfizer vaccine did. And it's a one-shot deal, which, frankly, for people who have problems with transportation, access is an issue. And then if you don't have broadband, how can you set up a schedule, schedule a time? I mean, we've got to do more calling. I mean, we have to meet people where they are and not just depend upon, the thing that, because what happens then is that people will skip the queue. Those who have will get. And those who don't have to have voices like Representative England, like Representative Gavan, like myself, fighting for them to get the access where they live and where they work.
And I'll just, as we begin to wrap up, that was one of the things. The question also was, how do we encourage our citizens here in the state of Alabama to not be afraid to get the vaccine? But then on the flip side, I think you've answered it. I don't think it's necessarily that they're afraid. It's making sure that
access, that they have it. And it's hard to for more. Absolutely. And so, listen, we have to work together to make sure that that Scott Harris has the access to the best logistical stuff to be able to make better decisions about how we're administering these vaccinations, because it's clear that we're not utilizing all the doses we currently have. So when I go to the well and I ask for more, they say, well, Alabama was the last state in the union of 50 states and effectively distributing its vaccines. We ranked 50th as of January. Now we're better now because we did that huge mass site, 8 sites in 1 week. But why can't we do that more often and more targeted areas? And why not utilize our big churches who are trusted, to not only for the vaccination, but for the outreach effort. I mean, look, people are more likely to listen to their pastors, to listen to their healthcare providers about the efficacy of these vaccinations. We need trusted community leaders to be the ones out there giving the message, and we need trusted community sites to be distributing them.
Thank you. We have so many questions, but unfortunately we cannot answer and present each question to you all. Questions ranging from, or actually comments saying we need more sites. And I'm just glad to see that the citizens are engaged. But Representative England, I cannot let you get off the phone, and we're about to wrap and bring back our president, Rhonda Garrett Allen. But the question is, will the state of Alabama pass a Alabama legislation for the enactment of a lottery, education trust fund lottery in the state of Alabama?
That's a tough question to ask. But I believe that most people support the concept, but the devil's going to be in the details. And that is something that Representative Gavan and I are going to have to make sure, because we want to, not only do we want to create that opportunity, but we want to create it equally. So everybody who's in operation right now can continue to operate. And there's no economic development in Alabama in many black belt counties, from the state level at least. So one of their largest employers becomes these casino operations. So we got to make sure that everybody gets an equal opportunity to access this gaming industry. And if that happens, I think you may see it in this upcoming session.
Okay, I really appreciate that. I thank you both for being here and participating. And we have so many questions. We're going to have to do this again very soon, but we appreciate you all. We said we would hold you no more than an hour. We're about 3 minutes over, but we got started a little bit late.
Well, listen, but Representative Gavan, make sure that people know that I put out a monthly newsletter. We put out weekly press release on bills that we've passed with really good information about what's in those bills. Please go to sewell.house.gov and sign up. You can, just give your email address and you be a part of that. And likewise, by signing up, you can also will get involved in our telephone town halls, which we are, because of COVID, having much more frequently, because not everybody has an email account and not everybody can access our newsletter. So we do telephone town halls, but we gather those names from our database. So please, I ask all of you to do that. And we also have something called a guide to grant that we've been putting out for the last 10 years. And it has over 100,000 subscribers. Most of them are not even in our state, who are desperate to hear about federal grant opportunities. So if you're interested in grants, we hold grant workshops. We just did one for HBCUs, historic preservation grants that are due March 15th. So HBCU specific money that can go to HBCUs to help them renovate their dormitories and other historic sites, buildings on their campus. Those are, really great resources. So stay tuned, stay engaged. And I can't tell you how thrilled I am that the Tri-County Links are doing this and putting it out there on Facebook so that people can get exposure to what's going on in our state and what's going on in our nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman Sewell. And we owe a debt of gratitude to our wonderful president, Rhonda Allen, for allowing us to do this community and engagement and legislative update and brief. We thank you so much for your leadership here in our chapter and all that you do across the state of Alabama. And so at this time, President Rhonda Allen.
Thank you. What a wonderful panel discussion. Thanks to our panelists, Congresswoman Sewell, State Representative England, and our very own moderator, State Representative Gavan, for an insightful and engaging conversation on issues that impact us on the state and federal level. We would also like to thank our Facebook friends for being such a captive audience this evening. Please be sure to follow us on social media for future programs of interest to you. Lastly, we want to acknowledge our program chair, Mrs. Kathy Bonds, and our facet chairman, Mrs. Katrina Jackson, for planning tonight's event. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our program. We thank you again and good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. This was fun. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.